The bills were spread across the table like a quiet accusation. Sarah sat still, the only sound in the room the hum of the ceiling fan above her. She counted the notes in her purse again, though she already knew the number. It wasn't enough for groceries, let alone rent. The phone screen lit up, a new message from Imran. "We need to talk tonight." Her chest tightened. 3 months behind, and her excuses had worn thin. She stared at the cracked window, the city's faint noise filtering through. Another message followed, "I'll stop by around 9." She closed the phone and sat motionless. Pride had carried her this far, but pride didn't keep the lights on. Since her separation, she had told herself she'd manage, that no man would have the chance to say she owed him anything. Yet here she was, owing everything. The kettle hissed softly as she poured herself tea, hands trembling slightly. Her reflection in the window looked smaller than she felt. She rehearsed words in her head, trying to sound strong, responsible, unbroken. The more she practiced, the less convincing she sounded. The knock came earlier than expected, firm, deliberate. She hesitated before opening. His voice came first, deep and even. "Sarah, I know it's late." The door opened a little wider. She kept her gaze low, focusing on the floor tiles. He stepped inside without asking, his presence heavy but calm. The scent of rain clung to his coat. "You've missed another month," he said, almost gently. She nodded once, silent. "I've given you time. But time's not paying the rent." His tone wasn't cruel, but it pressed on her like a weight. "I'll get it soon," she said quietly. "I just need one more week." "My friend," he interrupted softly, "you've said that before." There was no anger, just something unreadable behind his words. He walked slowly around the room, taking in the worn curtains, the cold cup of tea, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. "You live alone?" he asked, though he already knew. She nodded again. He stood near the table, hands in his pockets. The silence stretched, long and uncomfortable. "Sarah," he said finally, "you know I've tried to be patient. But the building isn't mine alone. I have responsibilities too." She swallowed hard, her voice unsteady. "I understand. I'll move out if I have to." "That's not what I want," he replied quickly. "You're a good tenant. Quiet, decent." His choice of words made her uneasy. The air felt heavier now. She looked toward the door, then back at him. "Then what do you want?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. He smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it, only the shift in his voice gave it away. "I'm saying there might be another way. Something that could work for both of us." Her stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "that life isn't just about money. Sometimes understanding can be worth more." His words hung there, careful but suggestive. Her pulse quickened. "I'm not sure I understand," she murmured, though she did. He took a small step closer, his shadow stretching across the floor, touching the edge of her chair. "You don't have to answer now," he said softly. "Think about it." He reached for the papers on the table, unpaid notices, one by one, and stacked them neatly. "You're behind 3 months. I could erase that." wipe the slate clean. She looked up then, only to find his gaze waiting. In exchange for what? She asked, voice barely audible. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, for cooperation. For trust. The words landed somewhere between threat and invitation, the fan clicked above them, breaking the stillness. Sarah exhaled slowly. You're married, she said finally. Does your wife know how you handle tenants? The faintest pause before his reply. My wife doesn't handle my business. His tone carried quiet finality, but also something uncertain, something human. She stood, trying to reclaim the small space between them. I'll pay you, she said firmly. Just give me another week. He looked at her, unmoving. I'm giving you an option, Sarah. I don't make them often. His voice had softened again, persuasive now. It doesn't have to mean anything. Just a way to help each other. Her throat tightened. The clock on the wall ticked, loud and relentless. She wanted to scream, to throw him out, to beg for mercy, but none of those things would fix the balance due. Instead, she said nothing. He waited for a moment longer, then turned toward the door. I'll come by tomorrow, he said. We can talk again then. The door closed quietly behind him. She stood still, eyes unfocused, hands cold. The rain outside had started again, tapping against the glass. She walked to the table, touched the rent notice, and tore it in half, not in defiance, but in surrender. Then she sat down, staring at the empty chair across from her, listening to the sound of her own breathing. The message tone on her phone buzzed again, a short text from him, sleep on it. She dropped the phone back onto the table. The screen dimmed, the room fell into darkness, and all that remained was the sound of rain and the quiet thud of her heart trying to keep its rhythm. The morning came late. Sarah hadn't slept. She sat by the window, staring at the same streetlight that flickered all night. Her mind replayed his voice, calm, deliberate, promising solutions that didn't need to be spoken aloud. The rent notice still lay torn on the table, half under her cup. She told herself she would find a way. She even dialed 2 numbers, one for a friend, one for her old office, but hung up both times before anyone answered. Every call for help felt like another confession of failure. By evening, the silence felt heavier than before. She hadn't eaten. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, every sound amplified, the kettle, the rustle of curtains, the tick of the wall clock. When the knock finally came, she didn't move at first. The second knock was softer. She opened the door halfway. Imran stood there, expression unreadable, voice even. Did you think about what I said? He asked. She didn't answer, just stepped back to let him in. The same coat, the same calmness. But something in his tone had shifted, no impatience, only certainty. He placed a brown envelope on the table. That's your file, he said. All 3 months. I can close it today. She looked at the envelope, then at him. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I'll pay when I can. He shook his head slightly. I'm not forcing you, Sarah. I'm offering help. You can refuse if it doesn't sit right. His words were gentle, measured, but the offer itself felt like a hand around her throat, polite, but unrelenting. She crossed her arms. And what do you get in return? Understanding, he said quietly. And discretion. The word landed heavier than it should have. She looked at him, trying to find something human beneath the calm exterior, but he gave her nothing. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer. She could smell the faint cologne he wore, something expensive and steady, out of place in her crumbling apartment. I can't, she said, though her voice lacked conviction that he didn't argue. Then I'll leave the papers, he said simply. Decide before midnight. He turned to go, but stopped at the door. I know it's not easy, he added. But sometimes survival isn't about what's right. It's about what's left. The door stayed open for a few seconds after he walked out, rain dripping off the edge of the frame. She closed it slowly, her hand shaking against the handle. The clock ticked louder. Midnight wasn't far. She sat back down, staring at the brown envelope. Inside it, salvation or surrender, she couldn't tell the difference anymore. She thought about her ex, how he used to promise better days before leaving her with debts and excuses. Maybe this was just another version of that story, different man, same silence. She pressed her palms to her face and tried to cry, but no tears came. Only exhaustion. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The night air grew colder. She stood, opened the window, and looked at the city lights, so distant, so indifferent. When another knock came, it was softer this time, almost uncertain. She didn't hesitate. The door opened halfway, and neither of them spoke. He stepped inside slowly, leaving his umbrella by the wall. The envelope was still on the table, unopened. He noticed. You made a decision, he asked. She looked down, nodding once. I can't live like this, she said. But I also can't live without a roof. He didn't answer, only exhaled quietly. The silence between them stretched, thick and fragile. Then he moved closer, his voice low. You won't regret it, he said. No one needs to know. She closed her eyes. Every part of her screamed to stop, to speak, to run, but she didn't. The ticking clock faded into background noise, time lost its shape. The world narrowed to breath, to nearness, to silence. No words were exchanged, no promises made. When the air finally shifted again, it was heavier, stiller. The envelope remained unopened on the table, but its purpose had changed. He straightened his coat, his tone now businesslike. You'll be fine, he said. I'll handle the rest. She stood by the table, hands clenched. That's it, she asked. That he nodded once. That's it. His voice carried no pride, no guilt. Just finality. He walked to the door. Lock up, he said quietly. Then he was gone. She didn't move for a long time. The air still carried his scent, faint but impossible to ignore. She picked up the envelope and opened it, rent statement stamp paid. Her name neatly printed. No balance due. She stared until the lines blurred. On the table, beside the papers, his forgotten pen glinted in the dim light, a small, ordinary thing, but it felt like evidence. She walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and let the cold water run over her wrists. Her reflection in the metal faucet looked distant, hollow. She wanted to feel relieved, but relief didn't come. Instead, an unfamiliar quiet settled in, the kind that follows surrender. She turned off the tap, leaving the room in darkness again. The only sound left was the faint hum of the fan, spinning slowly above her, as if counting down what was left of her dignity. The morning light spilled across the room, indifferent to the storm that had raged inside her the night before. Amara rose with a heaviness in her chest, her body carrying the memory of everything she had done, every touch that had broken the fragile wall she had built for so long. The silence in the house was louder than any noise, and she avoided her own reflection, afraid of what she might see in her eyes. Rafi's voice echoed faintly in her memory, his absence, his promises, his indifference, and for the first time, she felt a wedge so permanent it frightened her. She had betrayed him, not just in body but in the parts of herself she had given away so easily to someone who was never meant to hold them. Zion avoided her that morning. His usual calm seemed sharpened into something restrained, as if distance was the only way to control the fire they had unleashed. He spoke briefly, his words clipped, eyes averted, but beneath it all, she could still sense the same pull. Pretending it hadn't happened was impossible, yet acknowledging it threatened to unravel them both. They walked around each other cautiously, their silence heavier than words, both aware that one misstep could shatter the illusion of normalcy they so desperately needed to maintain. When Rafi returned home later, Amara tried to slip back into her role, but everything felt altered. She greeted him, cooked, and smiled when expected, but her mind remained tangled in memories of Zion's touch. The contrast was unbearable. Her husband's presence felt foreign, almost hollow, while her heart still raced with the ghost of forbidden intimacy. Every time she looked at Rafi, guilt tightened around her like a noose, yet the guilt was not enough to erase the hunger that still burned inside her. She hated herself for wanting what she should never have tasted, but denying it only deepened the torment. Days turned into weeks, and though she and Zion never spoke of that night, the air between them throbbed with unspoken truth. At family gatherings, their eyes would meet across crowded rooms, and in that fleeting moment, the secret would rise to the surface, sharp and undeniable. Amara tried to mask it with laughter, with polite conversation, with carefully practiced indifference, but inside, she was unraveling. She carried the weight of knowing that she had crossed a line that had no return, and even silence could not undo what had been done. There were nights when she lay awake beside her husband, staring into the dark, replaying every second of that night with Zion. The way his hands had trembled slightly, the urgency in his kiss, the silent understanding that they were both breaking rules that had defined their lives. She questioned whether it was love, lust, or simply desperation born from loneliness, but the answer never came. What she knew for certain was that it had awakened something inside her she couldn't silence again. She was alive in a way she hadn't felt for years, yet haunted by the shadow of her choices. Zion grew more careful, almost distant, as though afraid of where this path could lead. His restraint felt like rejection, but she also knew it was his way of protecting them both from disaster. Still, the restraint didn't erase the truth. Every glance, every stolen moment was thick with memory. Their silence spoke louder than words could, reminding her that what they shared existed even if they pretended it didn't. She realized then that secrets didn't disappear, they lived on in every heartbeat, in every thought, in every guilty breath. Amara found herself torn between the life she had and the one she secretly longed for. Rafi remained oblivious, continuing his routines, unaware of the storm beneath her calm exterior. She performed her duties as a wife, but her soul wandered elsewhere, drifting toward a man she could never openly claim. The contradiction hollowed her, leaving her both fulfilled and destroyed, cherished and condemned. It was a prison built from desire, and she held the key but refused to use it. As time passed, the sharpness of that night softened into a quiet ache, but it never disappeared. She learned to carry it with her, to smile while holding a truth no one else could see. The world looked the same, but her heart had been rewritten. She could never return to the woman she was before, because the boundary she had crossed had permanently altered the way she saw herself, her marriage, and the fragile web of family around her. She had stepped into a shadow where morality blurred, and though she longed for absolution, she knew it would never come. In the end, she accepted that silence was her only refuge. No one would ever know the truth, not even Rafi, who would go on believing in the loyalty of a wife who had once strayed beyond repair. Zion would continue to exist in her life, bound by the same secret, carrying the same weight. And she would learn to live with the ache of wanting what she could never have again. But deep inside, she knew the truth could not be buried completely. It lived within her, shaping her, reminding her that one night could unravel an entire lifetime. That he was just her uncle, distant yet familiar, someone who had always been defined by family ties. But after that night, he became the shadow of everything forbidden, the reminder of how quickly the lines between right and wrong could dissolve. Nothing between them could ever be the same, and neither could she. The secret became her companion, the echo of a choice that changed everything. And no matter how much she tried to silence it, the memory remained, a permanent scar etched into her soul. This section runs almost equals 768 words, staying sharp, emotional, and reflective, closing the arc with the lasting impact of the betrayal. Do you want me to now compile all three sections, 1 to 3, into a single continuous 2,000-word script with no breaks, so it's ready as one flow for your faceless video?